for PRAS as a regulator, we find ourselves between a rock and a hard place. On one hand, we've got our principals, our stakeholders. We think that we are too weak in terms of enforcement of the public procurement laws. On the other hand, we have got the procuring entities and the bidders who think that we are too heavy-handed on them, that they cannot function, within the regulatory regime that we have created. So that is the challenge that we find ourselves in. To make matters worse, when you look at public procurement laws, they bear mainly on the procuring entity. We've got this list of the do's and don'ts that speak to the procuring entity, the government entity, to say, each time you are doing a procurement process, follow these rules. Create a process that follows these rules.
We're going to be discussing developmental procurement. In other words, procurement with a developmental thrust. That's going to be our emphasis. Because it is government policy, it is government strategy, it is government thinking that whatever we do in procurement, it should have developmental outcomes. We're just doing routine audit. OPC is saying no to that. Be developmental oriented auditors. Your audit findings, starting with the audit scope, your audit findings should speak to these constitutional issues. As auditors, if we are aligning ourselves to these issues, we want to see a different breed of auditors. Auditors that speak to development, auditors that speak to the beneficiary of procurement, the ordinary citizen. President, ordinary citizen. Bambona president vajenda ma boardrooms. Kanatapa campaign period. Where does the president go? President goes there to the empty chair. He goes to Sakuva.
I think we had this question again this morning. So the problem now is, if the auditor is not well capacitated, things will always go wrong. I think for me, PS was on point. It looks like he's coming from a teaching background. He did it very well. But, as an auditor, at times, you don't have the guts to say it out. There are issues which are in the public domain. We have heard of a toilet somewhere built for 17,000 years. We have heard of an auditor somewhere who was tracked down by criminals after exposing the FD. We have heard an auditor somewhere at Simstats who has been suspended. So these are the issues which I thought a meeting of this should address.
It has been very relevant. Sometimes we've come to realize there's been an emphasis in one area more than the other. For procurement regulatory authority, their monitoring function, monitoring and evaluation function, essentially what we are sent to do is to go and establish the question, is what the PPDPA Act requires entities to be doing being done? That's basically the question. Are you doing what the PPDPA Act requires? We spring into everything specifically from that question. Now, you see we have to approach you with an open mind, but to discharge that role relies mostly on understanding the PPDPA framework.
There is opportunity, there is a risk, and if there is a risk, there must be a way in which we accept certain risks and then we also avoid certain risks. There are risks that we can accept, and there are risks that we may choose not to accept. From a strategic perspective, we have recognized that risk must be looked at the board level. When it is looked at the board level, we are saying it then encompasses governance. When we talk about governance, we are then talking about what are the risks that we can prudently take on. Risks that will not sink us. And when we have decided to take on those risks, how have we decided to reduce or mitigate them?
I want you to understand the meaning of the procurement record. It's not just one document, but it's a collection of documents and communications related to a particular procurement. So I'm going to present on the procurement record, depending on the type of procurement method used.
But what is the benefit being derived from that cost? How far are we stretching that dollar to get what? The benefit. It's like if, for example, on procurement, you want to procure some tires. We have Continental, we have Dunlop, we have Kumo. The specifications are the same. So if you flight a tender, someone gives you a quotation for Kumo, another one for Continental, Bridgestone, whatever. If one has given you only one of these as bidders, are you comparing same things? A Kumo might last for 6 months, while a Bridgestone might go for 5 years. It might be expensive when you are tendering, but it might be cheaper in the end. This is the whole value chain of procurement.